Oh, you mean I have high standards for the level of work I put forth? The third tool that I like to use, don't get mad, it's the moon. Think of your attention as a solar system. It doesn't really matter if you're moving towards or away. The gravitational pull is always coming from the thing at the center. You're making it harder to get what you want. I found the antidote to resistance.
Don't create like nobody's watching. I know you want somebody to look, you little freak.
Hello. So for 30 days, I put out some kind of content. The initial experiment was actually to share a channeled message every day. And then I had to determine how I wanted to define share, how I wanted to define a message, what that really meant to me. I'm not entirely sure how this video is going to work out yet, just because I never actually recorded the first part. I never did the part where I sit down and tell you about the process, tell you why I did this, because to be honest, it was not very clear to me. I didn't come into this with a solid process. The most that I did was I had determined the 4 types of content that I was interested in doing, which would be my podcast, Pattern Disrupt, my newsletter, YouTube videos, and Instagram, just some kind of Instagram. So those were the mediums or the formats that I knew I was working with. But then other than that, I didn't really do any preparation. I did actually do a couple surveys in different places across my different platforms to see which topics were of interest. It was really interesting to see how YouTube has a different perspective of me and have different wants from me than Instagram. But in both of them, it was pretty much like 40-60, just in inverse directions. So I found that kind of difficult to navigate, and then I ultimately didn't make any strong decisions and just moved with what I had the capacity for in a given day. In terms of what changed about my process, there was nothing really to change because, again, my production process, I had never set anything like that up. What ended up happening was a lot of having a thought, recording it, editing it same day, and then sharing it like the next day. Despite that lack of preparation, I have only missed 2 days, which I'm very proud of. There are a couple of things that I put out that I archived just because it wasn't up to my personal standards. And I made a reel about this, that part of the negotiation I had with myself when I felt a lot of fear and resistance around this experiment was parse through the fear, the resistance, and determine how I could problem solve once I had a specific thing that I was pushing against. I realized that the thing I'm afraid of with having to share something every single day, that I would end up putting out slop. What surprised me about this experiment is how calm I was through the emotional tumult. Up until the 19th, I was really not enjoying this process at all. I just felt like I was pulling teeth to get myself to do this experiment. And what came through during those 19 days was a lot of what I don't want. So I felt very clear about who I didn't want to speak to anymore, what I don't want to prioritize when I'm creating content, and what business models do not feel good to me. For a while, it felt like the only thing that was being clarified was everything that I didn't want. The experiment was not presenting me with what I do want. It just said, not this. I think a couple of months ago, even, that process or that feeling would have been very frustrating. It would have been super frustrating to only see the quote unquote negatives. But this time around, for whatever reason, I just felt calm, and I felt like I understood that this is part of the process. I likened it to drawing an object by carving out the shapes around it. And I do feel like now it's the end of the month, it's about to be May. I just feel clearer on what questions to ask to help me move forward. The hardest part of this entire experiment was the mechanics of producing that much content was difficult, but it didn't feel, generally when I'm answering this question about what was hard, I'm thinking about it emotionally. I don't feel like I was really lassoed by my emotions so much this month. And I just felt like I just produced and I learned, either through the process of creating it or through the process of sharing it and getting feedback. I just felt like I was learning. And so it didn't feel like there was anything hard in the emotional sense, but mechanically speaking, it was difficult to produce content every single day. What did I learn and feel throughout this experiment? I learned two things, and the third thing I'm going to explain in what I'm bringing forward. The first thing that I learned throughout this experiment is that I am not a visual first person. So I'm not really drawn to, in my artistry and in my work, I'm not really drawn to visuals as the primary mode of communication. And it was through this process of like being on Canva for hours, like graphic designing things, being like, is this gonna make them stop scrolling? Is anyone even gonna see this? Because technically, like, a lot of reels just come in a thingy anyway. So, and I was just thinking like, wow, I'm really not invested, I think, in getting better at visual storytelling. There are other senses that I'm more interested in activating while I do my work. And that has been very liberating, actually. It feels like a relief to admit to that and to let that be true. But I don't really know how to reckon with that when the world is so visual. And so much of what I currently believe needs to be true in order to reach whatever goals I'm trying to reach. I don't know how to reconcile that, or I don't know how to support myself through a transition away from visual first creation. I'm really excited to try though. That's the part that's really fun, is that I'm actually very excited to see like, okay, what does it look like if I deprioritize visuals and let sound take precedent? What does that look like? What does that mean? What can that produce or create or evoke in the context of YouTube, in the context of Instagram, something like this? The second thing I learned is that I am not a content creator. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. And it's funny because I think about this all the time, but it is very hard to separate the use of content as top of funnel and the current proliferation of content as the goal. Content creator, content creation as the thing that we're all aiming for. It feels to me exhausting. It feels like trying to feed an endlessly hungry void. And that is the business model that I've known I'm not aiming for, but keep accidentally getting sucked into. Shout out to the people who do it. I love you for it. I'm grateful. I intend to share more about this. Okay, and finally, what am I bringing forward? I'm really excited about this particular thing. I have developed or uncovered a tool if I want to understand and uncover my unspoken rules of engagement around a thing, a practice or a platform. I need to like up the volume or the frequency of how much I do that thing, and it will just make it very clear to me what secret rules I have been abiding by. And this is something that I think is really interesting and valuable for specifically neurodiverse folks, because there are or can be a lot of invisible ink rules that you are following or adhering to that you don't even realize, because I don't know, you got introduced to it one day and then you just were like, well, this is how it is all the time forever. And so one of the things that came through is I definitely realized that I have had a lot of rigid rules of engagement around how and when I put out content and what it needs to meet and surpass. And that's just excessive. That's what I'll say. It's excessive. And by sheer volume, because of the amount that I had to post, the amount that I had to share things. I had to really let go of those specifications of what gets to be a post. And there's absolutely a balance to be met when it comes to not sacrificing quality for quantity or even for comfort. Initially had realized in my prayer video, I had this very specific and to me unknown set of qualifications in order to actually pray. And by praying 5 times a day during that experiment, I just like didn't, I couldn't uphold that. I just couldn't uphold that. And so it helped to disintegrate that rigidity and allow me to rebuild my own relationship to prayer. And it's the same thing that happened here. So that is a really useful tool and a really useful concept to know about myself. If I want to uncover my unwritten rules about something, about a platform, about a practice, or a certain process, the best way to make those visible to me and then help to kind of reshape it as needed is to just way increase the volume or the frequency of when I interact with that thing for a short period of time, right? Like it has to be inside of a container. But yeah, increasing the frequency of interacting with that process is going to clarify for me what I thought had to be true and give me the space to ascribe what I want to be true about me in that practice. Well, that is everything about April's energetic experiment. For May, I will be spending 2 hours outside every day. I am so excited about this. So if you want to investigate some of your own hidden rules, check out this video about the 3 lies you probably believe about discipline and how to reframe those.